Hello, and welcome to a reading of the Kazusa After Story from White Album 2. This was released in digital novel format, and we're going to be reading through the English translation. So, it's not White Album season anymore. There, the sounds of many people playing their many instruments flew all about through the air. The children, crying and seeing off the men who waved as they left. The couples standing cheek to cheek who would never part no matter how much time passed. The grandfather grumbling and pulling his suitcase behind him as the grandmother hurried him along. The young children, the young people who passed through the gate in high spirits as their friends waved and cheered them off. And the speakers near the ceiling, rattling off place names, times, airlines, and the numbers of arriving and departing flights. In other words, this was what most important place for comings and goings, and all the sounds they made. The airport lobby. Airports are such interesting places. They're what we call a liminal space, which means people don't go there just to go there for the most part. They go there when they want to go somewhere else. So it's usually not a destination. It's almost not a real place. It's just the starting point for somewhere else. Everybody's got a story in the airport. I love that. 2:00, huh? And in this place, which was even more crowded and bustling than usual, was a young lady speaking quietly to herself. She had long black hair and an elegant glamour that made her stand out, even among these surroundings that threatened to absorb her. Her small face, with its perfectly balanced, long, narrow eyes and slightly thin lips, boasted true Eastern beauty. Her body was like that of a model, somewhat tall in stature, with a tight waist and full breasts. Well, you can tell this has been written by a guy. But then there was her attitude, stiflingly filling out her well-blessed body, the ill-mannered way she sat in her chair, grasping her knees, her almost shamelessly aloof air. The name of this lady, young and yet idle, beautiful and yet eccentric, was Kazusa Touma. What a funny way to describe somebody. I don't know, sometimes when people write descriptions of a beautiful woman, they just almost take it too far. And I think this is one of those cases. Like, we get it. You think she's really, really sexy. And in spite of all this, she was a famous pianist, known to tens of millions of people worldwide. Come to think of it, I suppose it is about to be Christmas. Kazusa vacantly surveyed the airport displays, the luggage that people were carrying, and finally hit upon both the reason for the congestion and the current season. It was already winter. This was an airport in winter. I mean, I don't really think that's the reason for much congestion. Unless you're talking about Christmas specifically, the holiday season, then yes, I could understand. For Kazusa Touma, airports held a great many memories. Breakdowns, declarations of feelings, separations, returns home, and new journeys. Casting aside, spilling, overflowing, reawakening. Countless pains slept in Narita, that airport in Japan. And obviously this is true for Kazusa and Haruki and Setsuna, but imagine the people in the world. Imagine how many, partings and feeling declarations and breakdowns. Imagine how many times that really has happened in Narita. Airports are just amazing. But right now, and right here, may I sit next to you? Huh? Oh, yes, of course. I can't read that language. The question that the middle-aged lady asked, and the words that immediately came from Kazusa's mouth, were not Japanese, as the words overflowing back then had been, because this was the Wien Schwechat International Airport. Because this was the current home of Kazusa Touma. No, Kazusa ne Touma. Be at the airport at noon. I'll come as soon as my meeting is over. It's amazing to me that Kazusa knows another language, and it didn't explain it. Like, when did she learn that language? Did she just learn it like after she moved there, or did she already know some because of her mom being international? It's interesting. She had looked at the text message that had been waiting for her on the phone this morning twice. No, 3 times. No, she had lost count of how many times, but she scanned over it again. It hadn't just been a text. Last night, in bed, the appointed meeting time for today had been told to her over and over, almost like pillow talk. And this time, for once, Kazusa actually held faithful to it. Which was how she wound up idling away almost 2 hours in this airport, and it was now just past 2 p.m. The stated departure time was precisely 3 p.m. If they didn't board soon, there was going to be trouble. But you got to be careful with international flights. If you're taking a domestic flight, yeah, you can show up like 30 minutes, 40 minutes in advance. International flights, you have to be there 2 hours in advance. They will not let you board the plane if you're not there early. They are crazy strict. Honestly, how long is it going to be before I can eat lunch? Kazusa grumbled in a tone that showed no sense of impending crisis, rummaged around in a pocket of her luggage, pulled out her 5th chocolate bar since her arrival at the airport, and stuffed her mouth with it. That's crazy. She's definitely gonna get diabetes. Like, oh, I like sweets. You know, that cute anime stereotype? That's cute. Having 5 chocolate bars in 2 hours, that's borderline obsession. I don't know what the right word is. It's not good for you. But even as the complaints dribbled out of her mouth this way, Kazusa was neither angry nor in a rush. For someone like her, who had been tamed into laziness, time was not a limited commodity. In days long past, waiting around idly for someone, a specific someone, would have irritated her. But not anymore. She was used to waiting. Oh, that one line just rips your heart out. She was used to waiting. Poor Kazusa. She had once waited over 5 hours before exchanging a kiss. She had waited over 5 years to achieve her desires. When she thought about those days, both sweet and bitter, beloved and maddening, a little bit of waiting around with a definite end was neither painful nor itchy for her. The meeting is stretching on. Just a little longer. I promise we'll get onto the plane in time. Making me show up early and then running this far behind yourself. You're a failure as a member of society. Oh no, Haruki's worst fear, being a failure of a member of society. After opening this long-awaited follow-up message and cursing a bit, Kazusa quickly shut her phone and turned the brief text over and over in her head. In general, Kazusa did not reply to texts. For that matter, she didn't send texts. After all these years of living together, Kazusa still hadn't broken out of the comfort of a little flirtation between lovers. Her innate disposition, aggravated by spoiling and indulgence, which led her to find many things bothersome, was also somewhat to blame. That's a really poetic way of saying she gets angry easily. But even greater than that was a lofty mentality, grounded in the Japanese virtue known as motanai. When communication was absolutely necessary, it was impossible for her to let it go without hearing his voice. She would make a call, disparage him to her heart's content, be met with tedious objections and lectures, snap back, hang up with a sharp parting remark, regret it immediately, start to redial but get a call from the other end instead, pick up with an expression of great delight, be given another drawn-out sermon, finally get a small apology at the very end, hang up, chuckle to herself, and, if nobody else was around, be seized with fits of laughter. Holy cow, what a run-on paragraph. That's not even a run-on sentence, that is a run-on paragraph. Jeez, I'm crow. But yeah, I could see that playing out between Kazusa and Haruki pretty often. After all these years of living together, Kazusa still hadn't broken out of the comfort of a little flirtation between lovers. I've caught a taxi. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. That's a pretty optimistic estimate, stupid. About 10 minutes had passed since the last message. You're not going to make it. Even if boarding is, let's say, 2 o'clock. If you get there at 1:45, they're not going to let you on. Like, that's not how flights work. After giving this short continuation a light retort, Kazusa did nothing but stare vacantly up at the airport ceiling and picture him, sending her the message in a mad rush, hurrying the driver along. She didn't read a magazine, or listen to music on her phone, or watch a movie. These time killers that would drive him out of her head were ridiculous. She couldn't possibly do any of that. Aww. That's a little bit obsessive. If watching a movie so you don't think about your lover is too much for you, maybe, I don't know. That's not very healthy. She refused to give up the luxury of letting this one person permeate her mind and body. Whether or not her fingers were moving over the keyboard, the space in which the wings of Kazusa's imagination fluttered was at once too large and too small. Okay, go ahead and board without me. I'll catch up with you soon. Ugh, why? Kazusa read this postscript of a message and still didn't move. It was clearly an important message regarding an important bit of business to take care of, but she freely ignored it. She looked at the airport clock. There were exactly 30 minutes until boarding time. The time limit was approaching. Okay, well, if it's until boarding time, that's a little bit different. If it's until takeoff, that's way, way different. That's way worse. At this point, if Kazusa didn't see the process through, they weren't going to be able to avoid missing the flight. But why are you here, Kazusa? That would be because you didn't make it in time, Haruki. 3:00 p.m. Not at the boarding gate or on the plane, but in the same airport lobby. Oh man, missing flights is never a fun thing, no matter how in love you are. That's just a super stressful situation. Now that the two of them had finally carried out their reunion after their communication exchange, the plane that they were supposed to be on was right on the verge of taking off into the heavens. I told you to board on your own at least. No, you didn't. All you said was that you would definitely catch up. This young man, standing in front of Kazusa, who was still grasping her knees in her chair, looking as troubled as ever in his coat, was Haruki Kitahara, Kazusa's manager and promoter, whose surname was the same as her current surname. Oh, they're married. They have the same last name. But Kazusa Kitahara just sounds... Actually, that does sound pretty good. But it doesn't sound natural. I would have caught up to you. Oh, no. I couldn't trust that. Remember, 2 years ago in New York, I let you wheedle me into getting to the place before you. And when you finally linked up with me, it was 30 minutes before the performance. And you certainly seem to have a good memory for old bygones. No, she has a good memory for people breaking their promises, which is a very sour point between the two of you. Even though he had broken his promise to Kazusa and fallen far behind, he hardly flinched at all, instead giving an answer that was half serious and half perfunctory, as though he were humoring a spoiled child. I had a really hard time, you know. Since you weren't there, I couldn't go out to eat, and I got so sick of room service for 3 days and 3 nights. I thought I was going to die. No, you could have gone out. You speak English plenty well. Even as she confronted him, Kazusa knew well that Haruki's extreme busyness all the way up until right before they left the country had all been for her sake. But she pushed all of the responsibility onto him and allowed herself to sulk as much as she liked. Anyway, everything about this is your fault. I don't have a single thing to apologize for. No, look, come on, that's enough. Oh, the bickering. They don't even seem like a couple at this point. They just seem like two people who don't like being around each other. Because they each understood that the other wasn't really angry. And each was certain that the other would forgive the whole thing very shortly. For now, there are 2 tickets available from cancellations for a flight 2 hours from now. It has 3 connections, but the seats aren't separate, are they? Well, it looks like they're consecutive numbers. They're economy, though. Are they? Well, that's perfect. How exactly? Because if they had gotten first-class tickets, adjacent seats would be too far apart from each other, making it difficult to hold hands the entire time. Wow, what a first world problem. First class seats are too far apart so you can't hold hands. That's so funny. We have to restrain ourselves from unnecessary expenses. Our management is pretty strict. Even if he had figured this out, she still wouldn't have said it out loud. In which case, I wish that you at least had gotten on the plane just now. At some point, the chair next to Kazusa's had been freed up, and Haruki finally sat down. And, as though she'd been waiting for it, Kazusa leaned her entire body weight over onto Haruki's side. Of course, Haruki took this weight perfectly naturally and opened up his shoulder to make it easier for Kazusa's head to rest on. Aw, see, now they seem like a couple. I mean, granted, they always were, and even when they bicker, they understand each other. But yeah, from an outside perspective, they just look like they're fighting a lot. So, we've got 2 more hours to wait. We're lucky we even managed to grab a flight for today. Oh yes, I'm very lucky today. Look, I apologize for being late, so cut it out with the sarcasm. Intolerant as ever. Without any sarcasm whatsoever, Kazusa genuinely reflected upon the day's good fortune. Waiting for 2 idle hours with thoughts of Haruki. Waiting 2 idle hours with Haruki. There was no greater happiness in the world than this. Wow, that's really sweet. Again, I think it's borderline obsessive that you're super happy you get to sit for 2 hours and think about your lover. A little bit obsessive, but it is really cute. By the way, Haruki, let me tell you a secret. Tonight is Christmas Eve. Yes, I'm aware of that. And yet, you've been doing nothing but work since early this morning. Are you really European? You are European, and yet you don't work on any days other than Christmas either. It's Christmas Eve, and yet we're spending it on an airplane. At this rate, the moment we cross the international date line, Christmas will already be over. You should be happy, though. It may not be much of a substitution, but at least the in-flight meals will be Christmas-themed. Hey, will you trade my chicken for your cake? She's so unhealthy. And it's true. When you cross an international date line during a holiday, it's such a weird thing. Sometimes the pilot will make an announcement like, it's Christmas, and then an hour later he'll be like, it's Christmas again. It's kind of funny. What the 2 of them exchanged, both from outsiders' viewpoints and from their own when they thought back over it rationally, were nothing but pointless, wholly insubstantial conversations. I mean, isn't that what life is about? Insubstantial conversations? I mean, not everything in life has to have a point. Just enjoy your time talking to people. Enjoy your time doing nothing sometimes. Why don't we go ahead and eat something now before the in-flight meal? I'm not really hungry. I'm starving. I haven't eaten anything since this morning. You should have had breakfast at least. I heard it's different when you're working with your brain. Never thought I'd hear that from the person who has never once made me breakfast in the past few years. I was just staying faithful for the instructions I received from a certain someone a few years ago who told me, don't make breakfast anymore. You don't think you could re-examine that a bit? Cooking is simple, but my fingers are crucial tools for my work, so I don't use them on anything wasteful. Well, I guess I don't really have anything to say to that. I use my fingers for two things only: playing the piano and digging my nails into your back. Are you aware of how bad that's been hurting? What a weirdly vulgar thing to say in the middle of this airport. My God. Kazusa is so funny, and she seemed like the really shy one, especially in the beginning. But now she's the type that can just say these kinds of things out loud and not think anything of it. It's just so funny to me. So, we will stop off there for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Kazusa's After Story, and I will be back with the finale shortly. So until then, hope you take care. See you!